Picture this. It's October 14th, 1066. The fate of England hangs in the balance as Harold Godwinson's Saxon army faces William the Conqueror's Norman forces near Hastings. Suddenly, the thunderous roar of rotor blades cuts through the medieval battlefield. A modern Apache AH-64 attack helicopter materializes above the charging knights and archers. What happens next would reshape the entire course of human history. Today, we're diving into the most incredible military time travel scenario ever conceived. We'll explore how one piece of modern military technology could have completely altered the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, and everything that followed. By the end of this video, you'll understand why this single moment could have prevented the Crusades, accelerated the Industrial Revolution by centuries, and created a world so different from ours that it's almost unrecognizable. But before we unleash medieval chaos, let me ask you this. What do you think would terrify 11th century warriors more, the helicopter itself or its weapons? Drop your guess in the comments, because the answer might surprise you. Let's set the stage properly. The Battle of Hastings wasn't just another medieval skirmish. It was the pivot point that transformed English culture, language, and power forever. Harold Godwinson had just defeated the Vikings at Stamford Bridge, marching his exhausted army 200 miles south to face William's invasion force. The Norman army brought revolutionary military technology for its time: heavy cavalry, crossbows, and sophisticated siege equipment. William's strategy relied on combined arms tactics that were centuries ahead of typical Saxon warfare. His knights could charge with devastating force, while his archers provided covering fire from distance. Harold's forces, meanwhile, fought in the traditional Saxon way, forming an impenetrable shield wall on high ground, wielding two-handed axes and spears. This defensive formation had proven nearly unbreakable against Viking raiders and other enemies. The Saxons were incredibly disciplined, capable of maintaining their formation for hours under relentless assault. But here's where our story takes an impossible turn. Just as William orders his first cavalry charge, reality tears open. A sleek angular machine of war descends from the sky like some mechanical dragon. The Apache AH-64 hovers above the battlefield, its twin engines producing a sound these medieval warriors have never heard and never could have imagined. The psychological impact would be instantaneous and devastating. Remember, these are people who believe in dragons, demons, and divine intervention. To them, this flying metal beast would be nothing less than supernatural. The Apache's distinctive profile, that predatory cockpit design, the sensor array that looks like glowing eyes, the weapons pods bristling with missiles, would trigger primal terror in both armies. William's war horses, already skittish from the noise of battle, would go absolutely berserk. Medieval horses had never encountered anything remotely like helicopter rotor wash. The downforce from the Apache's main rotor would create a whirlwind of dust, debris, and chaos across the battlefield. Knights would be thrown from their mounts, archers would struggle to maintain their aim, and the carefully planned Norman battle formations would collapse into pandemonium. But the Saxons wouldn't fare much better. Their famous shield wall, that unbreakable defensive formation, would begin to waver as warriors craned their necks skyward, shields dropping, discipline forgotten. Some would fall to their knees in prayer, others would flee outright. The bravest might try to hurl spears at this aerial apparition, but 11th century weapons were useless against modern military aircraft. The Apache's pilot, let's assume they're as confused by this time displacement as everyone else, would face an unprecedented decision. Do they engage? Do they try to communicate? Do they attempt to return to their own time? For our scenario, let's imagine the pilot chooses to intervene decisively on behalf of the Saxons, perhaps viewing the Normans as invaders threatening English soil. Now comes the truly mind-bending part. The Apache AH-64 carries enough firepower to obliterate entire medieval armies. Its 30mm chain gun can fire 625 rounds per minute, each round capable of penetrating armored vehicles. Against 11th century mail and leather, it would be like using a machine gun against paper targets, but the real game changer would be the Hellfire missiles. Each Apache typically carries 16 of these precision-guided weapons, designed to destroy modern tanks. A single Hellfire missile hitting the center of a medieval cavalry charge wouldn't just stop the attack. it would vaporize dozens of knights and horses, creating a crater that would be visible from miles away. The Norman army, witnessing this supernatural destruction, would face a choice: fight a divine being or surrender immediately. Medieval warfare had rules, honor codes, and understood tactics. There was no protocol for dealing with a machine that could rain death from the sky without warning, without sound, and without any possibility of retaliation. William the Conqueror, that brilliant military strategist who had never lost a battle, would find himself completely helpless. His revolutionary combined arms tactics meant nothing against an enemy that operated in 3 dimensions. His heavy cavalry, the terror of Europe, would be scattered like leaves in a hurricane. His crossbowmen, armed with the most advanced projectile weapons of their age, might as well be throwing pebbles. The Apache's thermal imaging and targeting systems would make it nearly omniscient on the battlefield. It could identify and eliminate enemy commanders with surgical precision, cutting off the head of the Norman invasion before it could adapt. Duke William himself would likely be among the first targets, and his death would end the invasion immediately. But here's where our alternate history becomes truly fascinating. The Apache doesn't just win the battle, it fundamentally changes how warfare, technology, and society develop. Harold Godwinson survives, England remains Saxon, and suddenly the entire trajectory of European history shifts dramatically. Without the Norman conquest, the English language never absorbs thousands of French words. Old English continues to evolve naturally, potentially remaining much closer to its Germanic roots. The rigid feudal system that the Normans imposed never takes hold, meaning English society develops along completely different lines. More importantly, Harold now possesses the wreckage of the most advanced machine ever created. Even if the Apache is destroyed in the battle, perhaps by its own self-destruct systems, when the pilot realizes the temporal implications, the scattered debris would contain materials and technologies that wouldn't be invented for another 1,000 years. Medieval metallurgists examining titanium alloys, composite materials, and precision-machined components would be looking at substances that seemed to come from another world, which in a sense they did. The scientific revolution that began in the 16th century might instead begin in the 11th, as English scholars attempt to understand these impossible artifacts. Imagine medieval engineers studying the Apache's rotor system, trying to understand how these angled blades create lift. While they couldn't replicate the technology immediately, the basic principles of aerodynamics would become known centuries before Leonardo da Vinci's first sketches of flying. Machines, the helicopter's engine components, would introduce concepts of precision manufacturing, fuel injection, and metallurgy that wouldn't naturally develop until the Industrial Revolution. Even if they couldn't build jet engines, medieval craftsmen would begin asking questions about combustion, pressure, and mechanical efficiency that could accelerate technological development by hundreds of years. But perhaps most revolutionary would be the discovery of electronics. The Apache's avionics systems, radar arrays, and computerized controls would expose 11th century scholars to the very concept of electricity, electronic circuits, and information processing. While they couldn't understand or replicate computer chips, they might begin the basic experiments with electricity and magnetism that wouldn't otherwise occur until the 18th century. This technological leap forward wouldn't happen overnight, but it would fundamentally change the trajectory of human development. England becomes the center of this new technological renaissance, attracting scholars, craftsmen, and inventors from across Europe and beyond. 2 centuries later, instead of the Crusades, we might see English expeditions to the Holy Land equipped with primitive but effective flying machines. The Byzantine Empire, instead of slowly declining, could be revitalized by access to this new English technology. Mongol invasions could be stopped by European armies, equipped with firearms and basic aircraft. The printing press, instead of being invented in the 15th century, might emerge in the 13th century, as English scholars sought faster ways to disseminate their technological discoveries. This accelerated sharing of knowledge would create a feedback loop, causing each new discovery to spread more quickly and inspire further innovation. The age of exploration would begin 3 centuries earlier, with English ships equipped with superior navigational technology and weapons reaching the Americas even before the birth of Columbus. The entire pattern of colonization, cultural exchange, and global trade would be completely different. But here's the most striking possibility. What if the Apache's emergence wasn't random? What if it was part of a larger temporal phenomenon? The same force that lifted a helicopter in 1066 could bring other anachronistic technologies to other crucial moments in history. Imagine Roman legions facing a modern tank, or Chinese armies facing jet fighters during the Warring States period. Of course, not every outcome would be positive. Medieval warfare was brutal enough with swords and arrows. Introducing modern weapons technology, centuries before the development of international laws, human rights concepts, or ethical military conduct, could create conflicts of unprecedented savagery, and England, armed with superior technology, might not become a beacon of progress. It might become a conquering empire that makes the historical British Empire look restrained. Harold's successors could potentially conquer all of Europe, the Middle East and beyond, creating a global English empire centuries before such things should be possible. The technological advantages might also be misused in ways that delay social progress. Why develop better agricultural techniques or improve living conditions for peasants when you can simply conquer your neighbors and take their resources? The feudal system might become more entrenched, not less, if one nation gains such overwhelming military superiority. Religious institutions might also react poorly to these technological revelations. The Catholic Church, already suspicious of new ideas, might declare the Apache and its technology to be demonic, launching crusades against England itself. This could fragment European Christianity even more dramatically than the historical Protestant Reformation. But let's consider the more optimistic timeline. The Apache's advanced materials and systems would pose engineering challenges that medieval minds couldn't ignore. The pursuit of understanding would drive the development of new tools, new measurement techniques, and new ways of thinking about the natural world. Medieval alchemists, trying to understand the helicopter's fuel systems, might stumble upon the principles of chemistry centuries ahead of schedule. The study of the Apache's hydraulic systems could lead to advances in physics and fluid dynamics that wouldn't naturally occur until the Renaissance. Most importantly, the very existence of such advanced technology would prove that human achievement has almost unlimited potential. Medieval scholars, seeing evidence of what their descendants might accomplish, would be inspired to push the boundaries of what they thought possible. This psychological shift could be the most important change of all. Instead of viewing the natural world as fixed and unchangeable, medieval thinkers would understand that human ingenuity can overcome almost any limitation. The scientific method might develop organically. As scholars attempt to reverse engineer Apache, technology universities would transform from institutions focused on theology and classical texts to centers of experimental research and technological development. The concept of progress, the idea that each generation can build upon the achievements of the previous one to create a better world, would become embedded in European culture centuries before the Enlightenment. Remember, we're not just changing English history, we're altering the entire global timeline. A technologically advanced England would interact differently with every other civilization on Earth. The Vikings, instead of gradually settling into peaceful kingdoms, might be driven to more desperate raiding as they struggle to compete with English superiority. This could push them further west, leading to more extensive Norse settlements in North America centuries before Columbus. The Islamic world, observing these technological developments, might experience its own scientific renaissance as scholars work to understand and counter English advantages. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad, already a center of learning, could become the focal point of a massive research effort that accelerates Islamic technological development. China, with its already advanced civilization, might be the first foreign power to successfully adapt and improve upon the recovered Apache technology. Chinese engineers, with their sophisticated understanding of metallurgy and mechanics, could potentially leapfrog European development and create their own advanced aircraft within a century or two. This global technological arms race would reshape international relations completely. Instead of the slow, gradual development of military technology over centuries, we'd see rapid innovation cycles as each civilization tries to gain an advantage over its neighbors. But here's a critical question. Could 11th century civilization actually sustain this technological leap? The Apache AH-64 represents the culmination of thousands of years of gradual technological development. Its construction requires advanced metallurgy, precision manufacturing, electronics, chemical engineering, and countless other specialized fields. Medieval England, even with the Apache as a guide, would lack the industrial infrastructure to replicate most of this technology. They couldn't build the factories needed to mass-produce precision components, couldn't refine the materials needed for advanced alloys, and couldn't generate the electrical power needed to run sophisticated manufacturing equipment. This limitation might actually be beneficial. Instead of trying to copy the Apache directly, medieval engineers would be forced to develop intermediate technologies that bridge the gap between 11th century capabilities and 21st century achievements. This gradual technological progression might be more sustainable and less socially disruptive than suddenly jumping 1,000 years ahead. The result would be a unique technological path that combines medieval craftsmanship with modern engineering principles. We might see hand-forged components assembled into precision machines, or water-powered manufacturing systems producing advanced materials through techniques that blend ancient and futuristic methods. Throughout all these technological and political changes, we can't forget the human story at the heart of our scenario. What happens to the Apache pilot who finds themselves stranded in the 11th century? They would possess knowledge that makes them either the most valuable person in medieval England or the most dangerous. This individual would know not just how to operate the helicopter, but would have general knowledge about centuries of technological development, scientific discoveries, and historical events. They could potentially guide England's development along the most beneficial path, helping avoid the wars, plagues, and social upheavals that marked the historical timeline. But they would also face incredible challenges. Medieval society was rigid, hierarchical, and deeply suspicious of outsiders. A person claiming to come from the future, speaking with strange knowledge about impossible technologies, would be as likely to be burned as a heretic, as welcomed as a prophet. The pilot's influence would depend entirely on how they chose to reveal their knowledge and to whom. Approaching Harold Godwinson directly might work, but only if they could prove their claims quickly and dramatically. Working through the church might be safer, but could limit the types of knowledge they could share. This brings us to the ultimate question. If our scenario actually occurred, would we even exist to think about it? The changes to the timeline would be so fundamental that the entire course of human development would be altered. The people who invented the Apache helicopter in our timeline might never be born in this alternate history. This creates a fascinating paradox. The Apache's appearance at Hastings would prevent the sequence of events that eventually led to its own creation. In some ways, this makes our thought experiment even more intriguing because we're imagining a change so profound that it erases its own origin. But perhaps that's the point. The most interesting alternate histories are those that demonstrate just how contingent our current world really is. A single different outcome at a crucial moment, whether it involves time-traveling helicopters or just a differently timed arrow, could have created a reality completely unlike the one we know. Our modern world, with all its achievements and problems, exists only because a specific sequence of events unfolded in a particular way. Change any major element, and everything downstream from that point becomes different. So what can we learn from this impossible scenario? First, it highlights just how revolutionary modern military technology really is. We take for granted weapon systems that would seem like magic to people from previous centuries. The gap between medieval and modern warfare is so vast that it's almost like comparing different species rather than different eras of the same civilization. Second, it demonstrates the incredible importance of technological infrastructure. The Apache helicopter doesn't just represent advanced engineering. It represents thousands of years of accumulated knowledge, specialized industries, and complex supply chains. No single invention exists in isolation. Each depends on countless others. Third, our thought experiment shows how technological advancement can accelerate once it reaches a certain threshold. The medieval examination of Apache technology could potentially trigger a cascade of discoveries that would compress centuries of normal development into decades. But perhaps most importantly, this scenario reminds us that history is not inevitable. The world we live in resulted from countless decisions, accidents, and coincidences. Different choices at key moments could have led to completely different outcomes. The beauty of this thought experiment is that we've only scratched the surface of the possibilities. What if the Apache had appeared during different battles? What if multiple modern weapon systems had been transported to various points in history? What if the technology had appeared in different civilizations? China during the Tang dynasty, the Islamic world during the Abbasid Caliphate, or the Maya during their classical period. Each scenario would produce completely different outcomes, demonstrating just how much potential variation exists in human development. Our current timeline is just one possible path among millions. We could also consider the reverse scenario. What if medieval weapons and warriors were transported to modern battlefields? How would a Viking longship crew react to finding themselves in the middle of a contemporary naval battle? What would a knight in full armor make of modern urban warfare? These thought experiments help us appreciate both how far we've come and how different things could have been. They remind us that technological progress isn't automatic or inevitable. It results from specific human choices, circumstances, and discoveries. So returning to our original question, what would have happened if an Apache AH-64 had appeared at the Battle of Hastings? The answer is both simple and incredibly complex. The immediate military outcome would be obvious. Harold would win decisively, the Norman invasion would fail, and English history would continue along a completely different path. But the long-term consequences would be so far-reaching that they're almost impossible to calculate. We would be looking at a different world, different languages, different technologies, different forms of government, different patterns of exploration and colonization, and ultimately, different people living different lives in different societies. The butterfly effect from this single event would ripple outward for centuries, creating a reality that might be better or worse than our own, but would certainly be unrecognizably different. And that's what makes alternate history so fascinating. It shows us that the world we know is just one possibility among infinite variations. Now I want to hear from you. If you could send any modern technology back to any point in history, what would you choose and when would you send it? Would you give the Romans concrete construction techniques, provide the Chinese with steam engines during the Han Dynasty, or maybe equip the Library of Alexandria with printing presses? More importantly, what do you think would be the most significant consequence of the Apache appearing at Hastings? Would it accelerate human progress, create a more warlike world, or lead to outcomes we can't even imagine? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this deep dive into alternate history as mind-blowing as I did, smash that like button and subscribe for more thought experiments that challenge everything you think you know about history and technology. Remember, understanding how different our world could have been helps us appreciate the remarkable and remarkably fragile civilization we've actually built. Every modern convenience, every scientific discovery, every social advance exists because countless people made countless decisions that led us to this specific moment in time. What will the next 1,000 years bring? That depends on the choices we make today. And who knows, maybe some future historian will look back at our era and wonder, what if things had been different? What if that one crucial decision had gone the other way? Until next time, keep questioning, keep wondering, and keep imagining the impossible possibilities that make history so endlessly fascinating.